Hopefully my rural small town internet can hang in there. I pray to God. I don't know if Emily told you guys what was up, but I was down at my storefront. I was trying to use the internet there, and that was a hot mess. And then tried hotspotting my phone, and then that wasn't working. So had to make the mad dash to my house. So let's hope my house internet's good. Thanks everyone for being here. Emily, thank you so much for doing this with me and getting in here and actually jump starting stuff while I was 5 minutes late to my own meeting. So fitting. But wanted to tell everyone, thank you so much for being here. Just a reminder, and Emily might have already touched on this, is that we're prefacing this with, we are not tax professionals, we are not CPAs, but we have been in this long enough to have figured out things for ourselves as far as our business goes. And then we have your list of questions that you guys have been submitting to us. So I actually printed it off. So we kind of have it to keep track. And then we'll be recording this and sharing this to YouTube later. So that way, if there's anything in here that you missed, that you're like, crap, I should have written that down. What did they say? Everyone can have access to that. So Emily, do you want to start the meeting by just giving a little bit of a background to yourself for anyone that's not familiar with you or your work, so they kind of understand like the standpoint, I guess, that you're coming from with your opinions and your experience?
Yeah, awesome. Hi guys, Emily Marquis here. I am a goldsmith for like the last almost 15 years, mostly in like DC, now relocated to Connecticut. And then we recently, my husband and I just opened up a jewelry school in the shoreline of Connecticut. I've been teaching for about 8 years alongside my uncle for Jewelry Class DC, which was a school we started about a decade ago. And we students how to basically start their own independent jewelry businesses, right? That was our bread and butter. Wasn't goldsmiths or, bench jewelers. It was mostly predominantly 20 to 50-year-old women who wanted to start as, and kind of a transition from being full-time wherever they were doing in their lives to full-time makers. So a lot of my experience being a maker myself, but then also teaching people how to kind of value their work and the quality of work and their time and transition so that they can support themselves on that. So that's a little bit about me.
Love it. Emily is really big on helping other people. She even has a Patreon account going so that if jewelers are really needing help and need guidance on a lot of things, then you can kind of sign up for different tiers in Emily's Patreon account, and she's available that way too, which is super handy and awesome. She's a lot to bring to the table as far as her experience, and the people that she's had in her life and she's worked with, also pass on their experience down the line. So she's a great resource to have around. I'm really happy to have her in this meeting today. So thanks for being here, Emily.
Thank you.
And then anyone that maybe isn't familiar with me or my background, where I come from, the reason we're explaining this is so that you understand kind of what we went through to get to the point where we're at and why we're able to give the opinions and the advice that we do. My name is Charity Wanechek, and I have had Ghost Tell Metalworks. It'll be almost exactly 4 years here in exactly a month. So I've been doing this for about 4 years, and I initially started this as just like a fun kind of a side thing. Like I knew I wanted a business out of it, but I was a veterinary technician. That was my full-time job that I've been doing for a long time, and decided I was just gonna be home a little bit more for my kids. And I had taken jewelry classes, just 2 classes back in like 04. While I was working on my undergrad, and really loved it back then. And had kind of like occasionally picked up tools here and there with the intention of hopefully someday getting to use them again. And 4 years ago, that's when the reality hit. We had our own house and had space for it. So the long and the short is that I started this business for kind of fun. Like I wanted to have a fun outlet and maybe be able to pull in a little bit of money to help, account for me, hopefully not having to work full-time as a vet tech. And was pleasantly surprised when it took off to be much more than I anticipated it to be. I ended up putting my notice in at the animal hospital within like 6 months of me starting Go Sell Model Works, which is pretty crazy. So it just goes to show that sometimes you get into something, it turns out you really enjoy it. Other people like enjoying what you make, they like buying it, and your business just continues to climb. And when you're someone that hasn't gone to a particular training program or whatever geared towards that path that you're in, you can get completely blindsided with the financial side of it because you have no clue. Why would you have a clue about the taxes you need to do, how to do pricing, all of these things? It's a really steep learning curve. And, you know, right now there are a lot of us self-taught metalsmiths out there. Great inventions like YouTube have made it to where we can learn how to do anything. Literally, if there's a video out there showing you how to do it, that means that you can do it. So the downside to that is that now there's an ocean of a lot of us that did start on the self-taught journey and are totally clueless about it. And then you have the ones that did go to, you know, school to learn, but maybe their school didn't talk about the financial part of it. Maybe they didn't talk about the pricing. They didn't talk about the taxes and all these other things you need to consider for a longevity of a business. So Emily and I are here because, you know, we get these kinds of questions, and I've had several friends reach out to me that are that are goldsmiths in the last week or two that have just said, hey, Charity, like, you've been doing this for a little while. Like, what do I do about taxes? Or like, what are your tips for staying organized? Or, you know, all of these things. And I answer those questions all the time. And it finally occurred to me, you know, I should just throw this out there and see if anyone wants to do a Zoom meeting. And this gives us a chance to help a lot of people at once, and we all learn from each other. So, you know, even if a situation does not specifically pertain to what you're going through, you can usually figure out some kind of way to alter it to make it fit what you have going on. So I hope everyone gets a lot out of today's kind of free webinar that we're doing. If you have any questions that pop up, feel free to throw those over in the chat. Any commentary, feel free to throw those over in the chat. If Emily and I are going back and forth something and we're not sure we have an answer about it, and you happen to have an answer about it, throw it in the chat. So we are going to keep everyone muted just because we're blessed and glad that we have this many participants. It's freaking awesome. So I sent this email link out to, I think it was 92 email addresses. So boy, howdy. So there's a lot of us that are like, WTF, kind of don't know what I'm doing, flying by the seat of my pants, pulling numbers out of my butt every time I make a piece of jewelry. So we're here to kind of give some guidance on that. I think I would like to personally dive into the pricing aspect first and kind of address that, because pricing is going to eventually affect your taxes. So we should definitely talk about that first. I wanted to say I got some help in the taxing realm from Shoshana Frank. She is another artist that has a social media account on Instagram. You should definitely follow her if you don't. She is a stellar goldsmith, like crazy talented and so unique, so smart. And I'd actually invited her to join this Zoom tonight, but she had other plans going on. But Shoshana actually forwarded me a pricing sheet to help me calculate prices. I took a wax carving class with her from Kate Wolf 2 summers ago now, and stayed in an Airbnb with Shoshana and Susan Fowman, and we'd gotten talking about pricing and everything during our trip. And so it spurred me when I got home to address that a little bit. I mostly do custom work. So some of this pricing stuff, keep in mind, custom work does not have the same pricing as pre-made inventory. They are starkly different. Stark contrast for sure. So when we talk about pricing, you need to take into account custom work is way more time intensive and mentally involved than a lot of work that you would do just for creating inventory and collections. So bear that in mind. There are a couple of different ways to do custom work. I actually saw one of the goldsmiths that signed up for the Zoom. I went to go check her account, and unfortunately her handle is escaping me right now. But she'd actually done a little video talking about, for her particular business, she has a difference between custom and bespoke jewels. So there are a lot of different categories that you need to take into account when you're pricing. I wish I could tell you that pricing is something super cut and dry. It's not. It's super complicated. But that's why we give you all of the tips that we have, so that you can take these back to your business and figure out how to apply them so that you can try to make your pricing better. I will definitely say that when everybody in the ocean of jewelry is pricing their stuff appropriately, it actually benefits the entire goldsmith community, metalsmithing community, no matter what kind of metals that you're working in, no matter what kind of art you're working in, it benefits everyone. If you are lowballing yourself because you're either worried about if your work will sell, if you haven't worked for more, maybe you have imposter syndrome and feel like your work's not as good. Maybe you're too hard on yourself and compare too much to what other people's work looks like. And saying, well, they sell that ring for $200 and like I tried making a similar one, it looks like crap, I'm going to sell it for like 60, or something crazy like that. It's that you need to be real with yourself about your value. We all have value. And if you're someone that puts a lot of thought into your collections and you redrew this freaking necklace 10 times, that necklace should be a more expensive necklace than the one that you just maybe like pulled out from wherever. You have more time invested in it. So one of the most helpful things that Shoshana did for me, and when we send out the link to the YouTube video, if everyone is liking this idea, I'm happy to attach that spreadsheet as a attachment onto the email. It's an Excel sheet. Yeah, we got some thumbs up. Okay, cool. Nicole's saying yeah. We've got this spreadsheet that Shoshana gave me, and it has really guided me a lot, though every single piece that I'm going to tell you the first couple of times I actually utilized it and I worked on like one piece start to finish, because I'm someone that does 3 at a time. So sometimes the time is hard to calculate. I actually did pieces start to finish 1 at a time, actually weighed my metal, measured my metal, all of that stuff. And I kept track. I shat my pantaloons almost when I actually saw what I should charge. And it's because it's way more than what I ever thought my work would be worth. So you're going to go through a little bit of that. And it's okay. It's totally normal, especially if you've been accidentally underpricing your stuff. Once you see like what you potentially could be charging for your work, it is a shock. It is a huge shock. Yeah, Emily's nodding too. It's because we forget, we're in this like instant gratification society. People like flash sales, stuff on sale. This is on sale. Type in this coupon code. Like you get the bargain shoppers and you start actually thinking in a bargain shopper mindset when you're pricing your stuff. And that is literally the worst thing you can do for your business in the long run. Some really good advice I got from 2 different people. One is Kate Wolf. She gave each one of us students like a 20-minute slot or 30-minute slot of one-on-one time when we came to her class, because we happened to get a class that had a little bit fewer students in it. And she said, you know what, each one of you guys can schedule 30 minutes with me this week. We can talk about whatever you want. Life, a particular project, whatever you want. I chose to talk to Kate Wolf about business. Because she is, I don't know if you guys know who she is or not. You got to look her up after this Zoom if you're not familiar. Okay. Kate is like the Einstein of the jewelry industry. I don't know how else to word it. She is ridiculously intelligent. But she told me, she said, this is how you work with jewelry. She said, you always start out low because you're unsure about your skill set and all this stuff. She said, over time, you need to increase your prices. She goes, always increase your prices, whether it's annually or twice a year, increase your prices. Okay. And she goes, you will know when you reach the maximum because people will stop paying for it. Then you know that you've hit your right price. The idea is that when you're actually paying yourself for what you're worth, you're paying yourself a living wage. That means you are not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Maybe Emily's drinking tea. I'm not sure. But
coffee this hour.
Coffee. I almost did that. It was so close. And then the internet thing happened. And I was like, there's no time. I'll drink water. So yeah, she said that's the secret. She goes, you need to push it as far as it can possibly go, because you figure out your branding, your materials and all that stuff, you do this calculating so you have a baseline, so you kind of figure out like, okay, this is what I'm actually into this piece of jewelry. I spent this much on metal, my stone cost this much, and I decided to pay myself an hourly wage that is fair for the area that I live in, which you can research that, by the way. You can literally type in the state that you're in and just be like, average hourly rate for a bench jeweler or whatever you want, and they'll give you an hourly rate, and then you can decide based on your skill set if you need to work up to that rate or if you're advanced and go above it. Like Emily is someone that's advanced.
I'm going to interject real quick. Do
Sure.
not Google how much bench jewelers make, because they are wildly undervalued.
Oh, okay. Well, what I got that advice from Rochelle Fachette, because if
Yeah,
you're
I'd
someone that's like
say-
trying to guess, because minimum wage in Washington State is like ridiculously high. We have one of the highest minimum wages in the states, which is why it's so damn expensive to live here. But if you live in a state that has extremely low minimum wage, like really low,
Right.
like Tennessee or somewhere, like you're going to be paying yourself like, God, I don't know, what are they going to pay themselves, like $7 an hour or something like that? But
when
that
I was hired as a bench jeweler back in 2015, I Googled how much like the average rate for a bench jeweler was, and the national average was something like 35 grand a year. First of all, that's not a living wage for most places, let alone most people, you know, especially once you have like not just your one self living in a tiny apartment. And I really think that the things you should be aspiring to, because you guys aren't bench jewelers, all right? Most bench jewelers, they work for or they work for someone like a Jared's or a Kay's or a Sterling, one of those box shops that has 70 bench jewelers under them, work in a warehouse like, you know, a pencil pusher, basically. But you guys are training yourself custom jewelry designers. You know, you guys are training yourselves to be artisans. You are not training yourself to be a bench jeweler. And there's nothing wrong with being a bench jeweler. I did it for 3 years. It's incredibly fascinating, fun, hard, challenging work. But that's not what you guys are doing. And I don't want anybody to look that up in their area and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to max out at 25 grand like a year for the rest of my life because that's the national average. Like that would be really defeating when you realize that you're manipulating currency. And that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later is the metal market and how that affects our pricing. Your jobs are manipulating currency and the market that is involved with. So everything you guys make swing that comes with that, and it's very exciting, and it's very, you know, you can make a lot if you're smart about it.
Yeah, and I guess I Googled like jeweler. I guess I probably didn't Google bench jeweler, so I apologize.
Yeah.
That's probably really bad terminology, and you're totally right. Those are like the peons of the jewelry industry. You if you want to have your own jewelry brand and work for yourself, a bench jeweler may potentially be a stepping stone for you to get your foot in the door that way. But career wise, I mean, it's kind of like the barista of the jewelry world. Like you're not going to make like you may not make great money, but it's like maybe appropriate for like a particular time in your life or whatnot. I never worked as a bench jeweler. I live in like a mountain town that's got like 3,000 people in it. So we don't have that here.
Yeah, I mean, bench jewelers, I know some really incredible ones, but I just don't think that I don't think it's what this group is aspiring to be. I think is just more
That's true.
the
Yeah, that's true. And this group, like we're leaning more towards a lot of them are one of a kind. However, We will be talking when we get down to the tax thing. Someone had a question about the type of business license that you should get and stuff like that. So we'll get more into the type of jewelry work that you're doing. Emily and I can't really like recommend what type of business license that you get, but we can let you know the different types and what they can potentially be fitting for as far as like what you're going to be doing with your business and what your projections are for your business model long term. Is my internet holding up okay, or is it pretty choppy? Is it doing okay?
I think you're coming in all right.
Okay.
I think.
All right. We'll take all right, just not great. Okay, so as far as the other person that brought something to my attention as far as pricing that started to awaken me, and this was before I had that conversation with Kate, but just awakened me to tangible value as an artist and doing this as a living, more so than a hobby, is that she actually, this friend of mine does not have sales. Like just flat out will not have sales. I know that's totally like an opinion thing. Some people very strongly believe in sales and have like their annual sale, or they'll have like blowout sales for like, Emily, for example, you had a sale going today, right? Like you have like you had some pieces that you put up because they were like prototypes or samples.
Yeah. So
Sale.
today I'm a no sales person. I very much am kind of like I hate them personally. I think it kind of cheapens the brand. But today I did a flash sale of some like $20 and $30 silver rings because I literally did a like a time lapse video of me cleaning my bench, and I found some stuff that I just have been holding on to for 3 years. And I was like, all right, here's a handful of rings. They're 20 and 30 bucks shipped. Just take them so that I stop moving them from spot to spot to spot to spot. Because they're not on brand for me anymore. And so I just wanted to like give them homes because I love them and they should be out there, right? But I think that I'm a no sale mostly person. If I do something, it's like, hey, 2 days only, this particular item, 15% off. And if you miss it, you miss it. And I'm not going to make you expect that I'm going to do it, right? Especially during the holidays. I do not do sales during the holidays because people want stuff. Why am I going to make it cheaper? And the one time you promised me that you want it, you know? So for me, I'm like, during the holidays, it's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
That's very good advice. So this friend had told me that the reason she didn't have sales is because she calculates out like what her pieces are worth. And she said, why would I pick that particular day and that particular jewelry to pay myself less per hour to make it? And I was like, wow, like that really struck me for some reason. I was like, okay, so if I'm marking this for sale, that means that like if I was normally paying, I'm just going to throw a random number out there. Let's say I was paying myself like 18 bucks an hour or something like that normally. And as a beginning metalsmith or whatever, and I decided to put this ring on sale, and I put on X amount, like maybe it means I only paid myself like $10 an hour to make that. You're like, whoa, did I like you start to think of it that way, and it makes a lot of sense. So this particular jeweler, she also recommended to listen to or read the book You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. I cannot recommend that book enough. And it does address money in there. And she brought up some very interesting ways to look at money in general. Money is not a dirty thing. It doesn't have to be a dirty thing. If you actually want to make a difference in the world, it helps if you have it. Because a lot of things take money to make differences in the world. So that's kind of a good thing too, is like reframing your mindset about money. And it's okay to want to have a better life for yourself and to value yourself and your work and your business, and to truly believe that you're worth it, and to shake off any imposter syndrome or anything else you might have going on, to truly believe that your work is worth it. The first time that you calculate what you should actually be charging for something and you pull the trigger on it, it is completely terrifying, because you're putting out a higher priced item than what you've been selling, and you get scared. Like, am I going to lose my established clientele? What's going to happen if I start charging more? Am I going to get backlash? All of this stuff. And I just talked to one of my jewelry friends last week about this that had questions about pricing. The fact is that once you start rolling out pricing that is more appropriate for your skill set and the materials that you're using, you will lose some of your clientele. So be prepared for it. However, the right clientele will find you. You will shake off the ones that are the deal finders that always want something cheaper. And that's not the kind of clientele you want. Because to be honest, the people that are searching for sales and a good deal usually are huge pains in the ass. And I'm saying that as a loving person because I love everyone, but they tend to be high maintenance. They always want more for less, and they always have something to say. That is not the clientele that you want. Those are not the customers that you want. You want the customers that love you, love your work, love your branding, and believe in it entirely, and will come back to you to buy again and again and again. You don't want the ones that come back to you because they say, yeah, I can brag to my friends that I got this really awesome ring for like slave wages from this jeweler that worked herself to the bones, but look how cheap I got it. It's like, it's not worth it. So just try to keep that mindset that you are worth it, and the right clientele will find you. Higher priced items do tend to sit for longer, but just remember, you're building your brand towards what it's actually worth.
So I've got something to add on to that. Kind of more like a tip than anything else. What I like to do and what I advise my students to do is, if you want to grow to a different price tier, right? You would make more, and you're not exactly sure how to afford the material to do that, or how to attract the clients to do that. One of the things that I like to do, and this is along the lines of, when you're selling your stuff, right? The things that you make, you're selling yourself, right? You're selling your story, your brand, what your clients are learning to shop for. And what I encourage students to do is, if you made something that was really, really cool, really beautiful, neat concept in silver with just an average stone, nothing fancy or expensive, but how cool would it be with gold details? How cool would it be if the entire thing was gold? Price those things out, and then fantasize with your clients and let them dream with you. And one day you're going to find a client who goes, I have to have that in rose gold. Let's do it. How much is it? And you already have the number, and you know how much it is. And you could say, it's this much. This is the time I'm going to need. These are the materials it's going to take. And you kind of start showing them that this isn't where it stops. This is only where it starts. And that the rest of the time we're growing together, right? And the longer, we talk about these higher end prices, whatever that higher end is for your clientele is going to require savings. And that's where the fantasy comes in. When they're thinking about it for weeks and months and maybe even a year, they're also saving because they know that you can do it and they know that they want it. And so eventually what will happen is that client will come back around and be like, hey, you remember when you said, let's do this chain in half gold? And they're not impulse buys anymore. Clients aren't spending impulse money, $20, $50, $100 for different people. Those are impulse amounts. But when it starts to get into the hundreds and thousands and even tens of thousands one day, if you're very fortunate to be making that work, your clients need to plan for that. And they get excited by that process, and that's what you're giving them, is that development and that fantasizing, and then creating that piece that brings you to that level.
Yeah, I love that. That's super true, is that you will eventually get the clients that, you quote them that number because they go, just out of curiosity, what would that cost if it was in gold versus silver? And then their minds explode because they're like, gold and silver aren't worth the same amount of money. I just went through that this week, and I'm like, no, they're very, very, very different. Like sometimes like a 1-to-10 ratio type of thing. Like it can be massively different depending on what it is. So a lot of that too is just client education, customer education. And I think being really open to answering people's questions. You know, we have a choice as business owners and entrepreneurs and makers to potentially be offended by questions that people ask us. And I've found that it serves well to always try to squish that feeling down and just try to answer them in a way that they are sincerely asking. Potentially it could be out of ignorance and you're kind of like, how do you not even know this? But we'll still go through the process and walk you through it. But you know, it just always a good customer service will take you really far too. As far as pricing yourself, it is true, you know, when you do your markup formula, which we'll talk about, the more money you put into your materials, the more you're separating yourself from that bottom line of what you have into that piece, because there's equations. So like, I'm going to throw some random numbers out. Let's say that you have like a ring that you made that's just a stacker ring, okay, that's sterling silver, and you're going to charge, I don't know, we'll say like $40 for the stacker ring. There's no stone on it or anything. It's just a band. We'll say that you want to make that in 14 karat gold. Like, how much do you think that's going to cost? Because the fact is that the gold ring in the same exact style literally takes the same amount of time to make as the silver one, right? You didn't do anything different. You still went through the same process and everything. Literally, your only difference is your material cost. And this is what started getting me thinking more towards starting to work into gold. And I slowly have been transitioning into it. And the fact is that you could charge like, maybe you could charge like $200 for that stacker ring that's out of gold. Maybe it's $300. Do you understand the difference? Is that maybe you paid, if you charge, maybe you paid like $50 or $60 for that strip of gold. I mean, who knows? But just think about the distance you just put between yourself by just adding more money into your materials. And the same goes for nice stones. If you're going to buy junk chalk turquoise that you paid $5 a cab for, that's great for learning with. And if you're trying to keep costs down for a particular clientele or just for learning purposes, that's totally fine. But let's say that you decided to hunt down a high grade version of that turquoise and you found a high grade stone out of that same mine. That high grade stone might be a $200 stone or more. So the fact is that it could be the same size and same shape and dimensions, like this cheap stone and this expensive stone, and then you make the designs around them exactly the same, but then you're putting into your equation like this stone costs $200 and this one was $5, and I'm going to go through and add in those materials in my time and do it times 2 to get a baseline price. You just made like a substantial difference in how much money you just pulled in. And not only that, people are drawn to more quality things. And they look at it more as like not, Emily was talking about like impulse buys, right? And that impulse buy amount is different for a lot of kinds of, everyone has a different amount that they're comfortable with spending without having like an intentional thought of wanting to spend it that day. Like you might just have X amount of money that you're okay with having impulse buys for. But when you start getting into the nicer metals, like if you're someone that's working in copper and jeweler's brass right now, thinking about working towards silver. If you're someone that's working in mostly silver right now, thinking of starting to integrate a little bit of gold, even if it's a lower carat gold that's like a 10K or upwards of 14, you know, it's smart because you now are addressing the possibility of having an heirloom piece that has a beautiful, more expensive stone in it and more expensive metal. And the fact is that that piece, even if it wasn't like together and made, is actually going to keep building in value because of the stone that you put in it and the metal. Even if they were separated out and scrapped out, if you hang on to that and you're like handing it down to generations, is that it's going to keep building value. So you want to make sure that like you're addressing that type of thing as you're trying to sell your work if you're starting to invest in nicer stones. I did want to, so we'll start talking about pricing more specifically. Emily, do you have a particular, like what is your method for keeping track, or do you do a printed off spreadsheet? Do you do a different pricing sheet for a custom versus something that you're doing for inventory for ready to sell?
Yeah, so I do a lot of work. Like I would say that my average sales are between like 150 and 550, and then some of my one-offs, my one of a kinds, can be in the like 35 to $7,500 range. So when I'm talking about kind of my pricing, I kind of make the assumption that someone will want this item in 14 karat gold, and I start there. That's for me to sell. Granted, 99% of the time I'm making things in silver, and that's great, and it's exciting, and I get to make those things. But my dreamy space would be making it in 18 karat. So I'm going to set my goals at like a middle ground and go, okay, I'm going to make this in 14 karat at some point. I need to know how much that's going to be. So when I'm designing something, I'm taking a look at all of the metal costs, not just the one I'm going to make it in first. So I'm going to look at how much material do I need, and how much does that material cost in silver, 14 karat, and 18 karat yellow gold. I do yellow gold because it's kind of the standard. Rose gold and white gold tend to cost a little bit more materials wise when you're buying them, because of the way that they're alloyed. They just take a little bit more work to make, and therefore they take a little bit more work for you to make. So keep that in mind. Those specialty colors of gold are not easier, they're harder, and you should charge accordingly. I do usually make everything the same, if it's a carat, whatever carat that's across. We're going to have to talk, like it's going to be more expensive because it's going to be harder. But I digress. So when I'm looking at a price for something, let's say the material cost is $110 in 14 karat gold. Assuming that it's not something out of this world labor intensive, I'm going to mark it up 3 times and kind of see where I'm at. I do not wholesale really, and I do not let other people sell my work for the most part. So that means I'm at 2/3 markup straight into my profits account, right? It's all labor. That's what it's paying for. It was paying for the shipping. It was paying for the listing. It was paying for the fees. It was paying for the taxes. It would keep the heaters running because I don't have my studio and we have to have space heaters, right? So that's what those 2/3 markup is paying for. So let's say that that's going to cost $330. Well, 18 karat tends to be a little bit more expensive. So let's call that $450, right? Well, when I look at those 2 items and I go, okay, I've got a $330 piece. If I do it in 18 karat, it's $450. Well, if I have the silver and I do a 3 times markup on a silver item, it costs $9. Well, that's insane. It won't pay for my labor. It won't pay for the taxes. It won't pay for, much of anything. So instead of just kind of lowballing myself, I use a relative pricing scale. So if the price difference between 14 karat and 18 karat is $120, the difference between the 14 karat and the silver would be $120. Psychologically, I feel like that's an easy understanding of the value of my time as these metals change. I still had to spend all the same amount of energy to create, market, ship, sell this item. It just happens to be made out of silver. So that's something I use pretty often. If I feel like that item is really overpriced, I might take a minute and go, that doesn't really, that doesn't jive. I'm going to drop the price a little. Or if I realize that increase the price, but I kind of make that judgment call when I'm looking at that difference. So for me, I do a relative pricing at a 3 times markup. And I try to make sure that things look reasonable. Because I think if somebody for $50 in silver and $330 in gold, that might have like a lot of sticker shock value. Like, well, why, why is this one so cheap when this one's so expensive? But when they're more relative and you see those increments, you go, oh, this is a valuable item. There's a difference because of metal cost, right? And even if the silver is so much more, it's like you're stable at the end of the day. Like your time was still all of that big, percentage difference. So for me, 95% of the time, I'm doing 3 times markup at 14 karat, looking at the 18 karat price, and then pricing platinum and silver accordingly. Yep.
Okay, that's great. Do you, by chance, do you follow a pricing sheet or anything? Or when you're actually doing your process, do you try to keep track of time and actual like measured metals or anything do you do any of that?
I do keep a pricing sheet of my molds. Sorry. So I have a lot of parts and pieces that I create, like I hand fabricate the original, mold it and cast. And for me, what I do is I keep track of the last time I had this item made, how much did it cost? So that I have an idea of, okay, this kind of item, say it was a women's, band, like just a stacker ring. It cost me $150 to have it cast a couple months ago. And if I wanted to have it cast in silver or in gold again, it probably cost me a little bit more because the market's increased. Mm-hmm. But at least I have an idea. Or they called and they said, well, can you make something like this, but a little different and in this metal? I can go, well, I've kind of made something like that. This is how much it cost. This is what I priced it for. And I kind of go from there. But that's really the only thing I solidly track is how much things cost me to make, not so much the time.
Okay.
Because I think my jobs vary so much that it could be, sometimes a chain takes an hour and then sometimes a chain takes 3 weeks,
right.
Where it's like, did that really make one more valuable than the other? Not really. There's still, charging a certain amount by inch. But that's the kind of thing I tend to, I'm just reading Courtney's question. What about those that don't work yet with gold and work strictly with silver? I think, Charity, you might have some good advice for pricing strictly silver.
Yeah. So what the first bit of advice I'm going to give is that we had someone message and ask about like if I keep inventory, this comes in handy by far. Anytime you get an order in from your metal supplier, I personally use Rio Grande, but everyone has their own, like someone else might use like Auto Fray or some other ones, Solars, but I use Rio Grande. Everyone's gonna have a different opinion on what they like, but I like Rio. Every time that I get a metal order from them, I actually go through and inventory the order as it comes in, and Rio's really good at putting labels on their stuff that you're getting. So like everything has a tag on it. It'll tell you exactly how much you ordered. So then I'll grab my inventory sheets, like the invoice that came with that package. And this takes time, so but it pays off in the long run, because then you actually know what you paid for stuff and what your metal price was. I do not throw those tags out. I actually look at the tags and then I go through my packing slip that came with the shipment and see how much I paid for it. So like even like one of my favorite wires to order in sterling is Crazy 8 wire. I love it. It's super comfortable. It also makes great bangles. You can use it on a split cuff. It's great. So what I'll do is like, say I ordered like 5 feet of it or something like that. I can go and look at my sheet that Rio sent in the package, and it'll tell me how much money I paid for like the entire amount that I got. And then I can actually go through and calculate per inch what my cost was for that wire. And then I write it down on that tag that they attached to the wire. And I also put the date that I ordered it, because that's what comes in handy. Like Emily was saying, is that the metal market fluctuates. And dude, 2020 was a crazy year. When chaos happens in the world, it directly affects metal prices. The more that shit hits the fan, sorry if anyone has kids watching, I'll try to keep it PG. The more that crap hits the fan, the more that gold prices go up. It's because our value of our dollar goes down anytime there's chaos or any unrest. So that's the same thing with silver. Silver prices also, can skyrocket because that's a precious metal. So it's really helpful to have that tag with how much you charge per inch, millimeter if you ordered something really short. And that gives you like a baseline so that if you're making a ring in this size 7, and you know that with your open split design, if you're doing a size 7, you usually use, I'm going to throw a number out there, like 2.5 inches or something like that, or 2 inches, then like, okay, well, if I paid this much per inch for it and I use 2 inches, you just told yourself how much of that, like how much it costs for you to cut that chunk of wire off. It gets really easy to lose track of value with finished type of metal because you're paying for them to deliver that metal to you in a particular form. So some kinds of wire may be more expensive. Nicole, yes, just wrote in that Rio includes the price per foot or ounce. They will sometimes on the invoices, and sometimes they do it per ounce. When they do it per ounce, it does not help. You're like, that's not helpful. But yeah, if they have the price on there per foot and everything, that's great. Use it to your advantage. And the other thing too is that the next time you go to order, you can take that tag. Like if I need to order something and I'm running low on it, I'll actually take the tag, and then you can look and see how much metal prices have fluctuated from the last time you ordered. And if they fluctuated substantially, that can have you be like, I probably need to increase my prices a tiny bit more just to help absorb some of that difference, because the chances could be that maybe you happened to buy metal last when prices were down that one market day, you got really lucky and you got metal prices cheaper. Well, maybe you need to actually be charging for closer to like what it's valued at the day that you made it instead of the day that you ordered it and got it in the mail, if that makes sense. Like you want to make sure you're always reaping the rewards on the positive end. Like don't lose money over it. Even if you paid more money for the metal and then metal prices go down later and metal prices are cheaper when you make it, I would not mark it down more. You're still out that pocketed expense for what you paid for it. And in all of I mostly do custom work, and I actually put a disclaimer in all of my custom invoices. When they get in there to pay it, I have an entire like terms and condition thing. It is long, I'm not gonna lie to you, but I also have everything in there that like there is no wiggle room for misunderstandings or anything. And I tell them that my custom quotes in the end can potentially vary by plus or minus. I put the minus on there, even though that's not going to happen very often, but plus or minus 15% is the wiggle room I decided to give myself. And I said that could be due to metal market fluctuating costs. It could be due to unforeseen time, just because customs can all have different requirements. And sometimes a custom is really hard to guess how much time you're going to be into it. So I cannot recommend enough giving yourself wiggle room, especially with customs. And I even put an FAQ section on my website. I put all that stuff in there so that nobody has any excuses before they decide to do a custom with me that, they're going to expect this price to be solid. It's a little bit fluid. Sometimes you get into it, or say that you get into it and they change their mind 3 times, then you're going to charge them a little bit more. So, just keep that in mind, but marking your prices when you get metal ordered in is super helpful. I'm going to click on this share screen thing, so hopefully it works. I want you guys to see the Excel sheet that I have. I edited the one that Shoshana gave me a little bit to cater more towards custom work, but I want you to kind of see what it looks like. And I'm going to scroll down so you can at least have a glance at what it's looking like, and then we can talk about it. So let's see if this works. Share screen. Okay. Select a window or an application. You guys have never clicked on this before. Pricing sheets. Here we go. Share. Okay. Oh my gosh, it worked, you guys. Look at me being all tech savvy and stuff. All right. Gold star for the evening. Okay, so this is the pricing sheet, and I adjusted this a little bit. However, this would work for something that was for inventory or collection or whatnot. What I decided to do, since I mostly do custom work, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't necessarily do one of these sheets for every single piece that I make. Some pieces are close enough to each other in design and material requirements that I already have a gauge on about how much it would cost because I'd already completed this sheet at some point. So it gave me a baseline to be able to continue it. I am someone that can be really great with log keeping, and I also be really bad with log keeping. It's all about my mood and the day. But this at least will give you some guidance. So this gives me a chance. Like I said, I catered this more towards custom client, but this tells me the client contact info, when they place their order, if they did deposit. And this is where you start looking at your materials. Okay. This is great because what I can do is say, like, we'll keep talking about crazy 8-wire because why not? Crazy 8-wire sterling silver. This I would do, like, I actually have this set up in Excel, so it's an equation. So if I say I calculated it out and it's like, I don't know, we'll say like 25 cents an inch, which is totally not true whatsoever. It's more than that. 25 cents an inch, whatever, and I just did an 8-inch bangle, then it'll actually calculate out how many inches, like what the total is. Okay, so all of this together, you can add in all of your materials. So you'd have like wire, bezel wire, stone, you know, clasps, chain, any of this stuff. And then say that you want to make sure that you covered a little bit for like you used a crap ton of solder on this one particular set or something like that. I mean, you can think about your expendable items that you're using too, because you need to be recouping a little bit of that. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually add like a little bit of a fee in down here if I really use like a ton of gas or something like that. It was a really big project. You have to figure those things into your costs a little bit. I never give access to clients to this sheet, understandably. And I also never put custom prices out there in the open. I always encourage to hold that in your DMs and your emails with clients, just because you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into that. What if you accidentally undercharged on something? Someone is going to have screenshotted it.
I've done that. Fuck.
Yeah, it's not good. Like someone could have screenshot it and maybe you fixed it later. They're gonna be like, yeah, well, I saw that you made this same ring. Like, why is it this much more? You know, so you just want to prevent those kinds of situations. So hold custom pricing near and dear to your heart, just saying. So this is pretty helpful. Like I put 20 bucks in here for labor, just because I looked into what I thought was reasonable at the time. This is a little bit of an older sheet, but a little bit reasonable at the time for my skill level and stuff. And so this is what I decided to do for labor. And so I kept track of my hours over here. So I could actually, you know, this would have been for like more of a substantial custom piece that might have taken several days to complete or whatever. But it really helped me figure this out. And then this is how Shoshana does hers. So she does a 2x markup. And then let's see, rep. I'm trying to think of what that's for. 2 markup. I might have to ask her about that one. That might just be extra money you're adding on for helping cover expenses, like website, that kind of thing, like operating costs, packaging, whatnot. And then wholesale, okay. And then retail is another 2x. So this is something Shoshana told me. She goes, Charity, you shouldn't be scared of wholesale. And I was like, well, I kind of am, because like I don't want to have to work for like slave labor. And this sounds horrible. And like I tend to make one of a kind pieces. So like that's not really ideal for wholesale stuff. If you're going to do one of a kinds, that's more if you're going to do a repeat piece, then you know you get good at and faster at it, makes more sense. But she goes, well, as long as your stuff is priced appropriately, you always make money on wholesale. I mean, there's no doubt you'll make more money on retail, but as long as you're doing your pricing right, you'll always make money on wholesale and your business will still do well. So just hearing that helped a lot. But like this is a pretty simple price sheet. This isn't anything complicated. And but this section is where it really comes in handy that you kept your tags and you know, kept track of your metal when it came in, and your stones when they come in. That's another thing, is that I keep track of my stones. I have a stone problem, like a lot of us do. We're in this business because we like pretty things. And when it starts to get out of control, you're like, holy crap, I have so many stones, but I'm gonna keep buying more. What I actually started doing on mine is I bought, I think Corky might have actually shared it on a Metalsmith Society tip, potentially. I have these clear boxes I bought that hold index cards and have like snap lids on them, and bought index cards. I bought double stick tape and actually go through and tape my cabochons, if they're cabochons, to these cards. That way I can like label what the stones are, and I group them together. Actually have like 8 of these boxes. They're all by seller. That's how I keep my stuff organized, but you can do whatever you want. And then I bought these little like manila folders to organize them, but you can actually keep track of what you paid for a stone. It doesn't have to be on the stone. It can be on the piece of paper next to the stone. I will say, when you're sending, see, she's got a stone. Courtney's got stones there she's looking at. See, stone hoarders. Ooh, I like it. Shiny. So I actually keep track of that stuff, but I will say I am very careful when you're sending stone pictures to potential customers or clients. Do not let them see what you paid for your stone. It's none of their business. None ya. So take them off the card. That's why it's double stick tape, and then do like a group picture and then just put it back on. Let's see, we have some questions over here in the chat. What do you do for pieces that have a lot of stamping? That's where your time really comes in, for sure, because stamping takes time and you had to get it lined out and everything. And when you get up there and your skill set's getting really good and you're getting really good at stamping, that means your hourly rate needs to go up, because your hourly rate increases with skill set and improvement. A question from Michelle. Can someone explain what markup is? We don't just charge for labors and supplies. Nope. If you just charge for labor and supplies, then you are essentially just an employee for yourself instead of a business owner. You're essentially just kind of paying yourself hourly. So try to stay away from that as much as possible. You need to have markup in order for your business to grow and for you to actually be able to pay your bills as a business owner, because it can get expensive, and that gives you a chance to continue to buy nicer materials and nicer equipment and keep expanding your skills and be able to pay to go to classes at Emily's school, for example. I am paying her money for a class in May. What about the amount of material used for different sizes? Do you price each piece individually? So personally, for gold, since gold is so expensive and every tiny bit carries such a substantial amount of money with it, I do price by the size for gold stuff. For silver, though, not necessarily, unless it's substantially huge. I just made like a size 10 men's pinky ring that was like a super thick gauge sheet. So like what I charged for that would have not been the same as like a size 7 thick gauge sheet, like, because there's a substantial difference in the amount of sheet that I needed for the wide band. So I mean, within reason, if I'm doing a silver ring that's like a size 5.5 and I'm doing a similar ring in like a size 7, I wouldn't necessarily charge the price differently. I would probably keep them pretty comparable. Just
Yeah.
what do you think, Emily?
As somebody who does like a lot of gold rings, I kind of I put them all into the same category. My prices change based on like thickness, you know, if it's significantly different. But a size 3, a size 5, a size 8, a size 10, the client who pays more for the size 3 and the client who pays less technically for a size 10, in my head, that kind of evens out a little bit, but I don't think anybody should be rewarded or fined, so to speak, for having different size fingers, you know? So for me, I try to find a reasonable cost that is good across the board, not too cheap, just so that it like evens out. And the average size finger is like a 6 to 8. That's what they call an average size finger. That's, you know, I usually price for that and then just kind of go, you know, out, you know. I think that in the end, it all comes out in the wash. If you are doing something custom for somebody, like of course, charge for the material. But if you're stocking rings and just making them available, you could charge somebody for sizing. That would make sense if the ring was made in a 3 and priced for a 3 and they want a 10, charge them to increase the size of the ring. But if you're just stocking something on a retail or wholesale kind of style, I think that they should all be approximately the same cost.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Normalize the pricing a little bit on it.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I kind of fudge that a little bit. It's just more dependent on like the amount of materials that I'm using. And if I'm making something that is going to be harder to form, or is like a substantial difference in like length for a ring band or whatnot, or, you know, a longer chain, I definitely keep track of chain pricing, since chain can vary so much. I keep track of those individual ones. And then if you're gonna, you know, do chain by the foot or whatever, you know, you just can calculate out your inches if you were a good metalsmithy and kept track of your price per inch. But no, that's great. Vanessa just wrote in, do you think Etsy should be retail or wholesale prices? Definitely retail, for sure. That's a really good question. Etsy is really great in a lot of ways. I will say, with a grain of salt, that I have personally veered away from them in the last few years. I think when you get to the point where you're doing pretty good with sales, if you can build a website that is separate from Etsy, and is hosted by someone that's not necessarily shop dependent, start filtering your clients over to your website, and then you can put this is what I did, is I filtered them over to ghosttownmetalworks.com, put a button on there that says click to shop, and I made that shop button go to my Etsy shop. But I wanted to train people to go to my website first, because I knew eventually that I would want to start selling through my own website and cut out the middleman. So if you can train them to go to your website first, when you finally decide to change shop, whenever you do that, it'll benefit you for sure. They'll know how to find you, as opposed to just taking your Etsy shop down and just leaving them wondering like, where the freak did they go? I used to buy stuff from them all the time. So, but yeah, Etsy, you should definitely be selling retail, and you need to be making sure that you're working your Etsy fees into your pricing, because their fees have gone up substantially. So make sure that, you know, even if you're selling, like, say that you're doing like a little pop-up sale locally, if anyone's allowed to do those right now, don't even know, depends on where you live. But you could be selling a ring there for 50, but maybe you have it listed for like 55 in your Etsy shop, and it's because you have fees, and then you get charged processing fees, and then there's listing fees and all of that stuff. So just make sure that you're working that into your pricing, definitely. Etsy is no longer handmade, so you'll be competing with items made in China. I know, it's true, but you know what? This is the honest to God truth, is that not many people are going to discover you on Etsy. But if you're choosing to send people to your Etsy shop, then that's perfect. It's a very user-friendly platform. They make it really easy for listings. You get a little bit of a discount on postage rates usually. So it has its purpose. It really does streamline things, and they'll give you tax documents at the end of the year if you hit a certain point to help you with your taxes. So it does have some perks to it, especially if you're just starting out. It is great. Etsy's a great tool. And eventually you can work yourself towards having a different type of online shop. But for really getting your bearings and figured out, Etsy has its place. Just don't be expected to get discovered on Etsy. That's my only side note, is that you will be literally be referring people to your direct Etsy shop.
So as somebody, like, I use Etsy just because, I mean, it's like, so and you're seeing this in the chat, there's brand recognition for Etsy. So I feel like when I throw out my net to somebody who may not trust me inherently from Instagram, or they kind of like just saw me out in the wild and I said, oh yeah, like, you can buy my stuff, because like I don't know about you guys, but I'm that annoying person who somehow tries to mention that I am a custom jeweler or that I run a jewelry school, every conversation, I don't care how we're talking, you're probably going to find out that that's what I do, because I have to sell myself or else I'm not going to continue to get clients, right? But if somebody doesn't know you or doesn't have any relationship with you yet, seeing you on something like Etsy has a lot of inherent trust. They know what it is. So when you're learning and you're growing and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, you can get yourself rolling pretty easily on a site like that without trying to convince people that you're legit, because they navigated to your website and there was 3 typos you didn't notice, you know, and they were like, all right, forget this. She can't even type. Why am I going to buy jewelry from her? But I think that something like that definitely is a nice stepping stone. I know for us, we're juggling the school and the Instagram and the custom jewelry and the bridal jewelry. And for me to like just put stuff like, you know, the stuff I know I make all the time that people want to know the pricing of, I put it on Etsy and I don't have to think about it. People just find it there. They trust the information. They know how to do the checkout. And that is like a set it and forget it. The day that I decide to like actually make a website, everything else is probably going to have to be on autopilot. So while I totally agree that you should probably eventually get to your own site, you should probably not be navigating people to support somebody else's big box brand. I do think that it is a very easy foot in the door for a lot of new makers, and it's better than not selling it at all. Absolutely. Right? So, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of like see if your pricing works. It's so easy to just hop on there and go, okay, that was too cheap. I'm just going to change that. Or, oh my gosh, the market just changed and I need to like hide all of my gold items, but I'll leave my silver ones up for a minute, you know? Do we have the same pricing for Etsy and website / Instagram? I do, but I think I price my stuff pretty fairly. That, you know, the fees are a write-off at the end of the day. So I just kind of don't mind those so much. I do try to avoid, like, you know, if I can get somebody to buy through PayPal or Venmo or Square or a check, like I go for that. But you know, if somebody just feels more comfortable, like I've got people who've been shopping with me for years who just are like, I'd rather buy through Etsy. And I'm like, okay, go for it. You know, if that's what makes you comfortable, you know. Technically messaging, sorry, I'm like reading all these things. We'll move on from Etsy in just a minute, because like this is one of 25 questions we've got. But if someone favorites your stuff on Etsy, it is technically spam if you message them. It is against Etsy's rules. You're not supposed to send them messages. I do it anyways. I heard earlier this week, IG is going to be taking down accounts that sell directly because it goes against T&Cs. Well, you know, Instagram, Facebook, I mean, that's why you should have an email list. We're not here to talk about email lists, but if you don't have one, it doesn't matter how you sell. If you don't have an email list, that's your only mistake at the end of the day.
Yes.
Be careful with selling or listing items as sold on IG. Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's a lot of things I see on Instagram that go against the rules. So we'll see how it fares when every single person drops their site because they can't sell on it anymore.
I guess I can't keep putting my nudes up anymore, huh? Okay.
Yeah, you got to bring it over to OnlyFans.
Well, I even mark stuff as available or sold on captions, and I don't sell through Instagram. Like very rarely, I send people to my online shop, and my who I use for my shop. I know a lot of people that use Big Cartel, that use Shopify. You know, there's some of those other ones, and they are supposed to be great and user friendly. I actually use GoDaddy as my, that's who I purchase my domains through. And then they have an affiliate called Go Central that you use for your website builder, and you can actually add on an e-commerce. And I think their rates are pretty reasonable. I only pay, I think it's like 14 bucks a month or something like that for my online shop. And they are affiliates with Shippo for shipping out your stuff, and Shippo will like literally put a bid in for you to get like the cheapest rates as possible the day that you're sending your stuff out. You can get your post office, like your postal stuff, super cheap. So there are some perks to it, and they also have integrated stuff for like sending out email lists, doing blog posts. So I've been pretty happy with them, and it's pretty easy to build a template, or you can totally hire someone to make it from scratch, but just throwing that out there. When I did decide to transition from Etsy to my own website, that's who I went for. But side note, I still have my Etsy shop there. I just have a note on there saying that it's not active because I didn't want anyone else to open an Etsy shop with my business name on it. So I left it floating there, and it just doesn't have any listings in it really. It just says where they can find me. But I still occasionally get inquiries through there, not very often, but I do think that in terms of visibility online, it is smart to kind of pepper your name out there as much as possible across all the platforms. So having a shop there is free. They're not charging me anything for holding my place. You just get charged by listing, so whatever.
There was one more question, and then I think we'll wrap up. Somebody said that they noticed Etsy charging an extra fee or a percentage for a sale through their ads. And I do recall that happening. I think earlier this year, they said that if you make a certain amount of money through their thing, I think it was like a $20,000 annual threshold. If you made X amount, they would start to do free ads through Google with your stuff. And if their free ad that they were putting into the search sent somebody your way, they were going to take a percentage of that sale. And I think it happened one time to us this year where somebody happened to click on an ad that they saw. I think it's one of those things where it's like they're advertising you. Advertisement costs money. You're not paying that. So you wouldn't have gotten that sale without them.
Yeah.
The only reason that person bought something from you is because they advertised you. I don't really think it's a threat. As somebody who only had one all year, out of 100 sales, one came from Etsy ads. I think it's, if you realize that like your shit's going bananas through these weird Etsy ads, like maybe get off Etsy, your shit's going bananas.
It's like a referral fee.
But
it kind of makes sense to me, even if it's annoying. It kind of makes sense because they're referring people to you.
Right.
Like a finder's fee or whatever they want to call it. Okay. Well, we're going to move on to tax related questions. Hopefully that pricing stuff answered some questions for you guys, or at least give you a little bit of direction. Let's see. Should we start with, I think we should start with what you should be keeping track of for taxes.
Everything. Keep track of everything.
Like,
become a hoarder.
You're a hoarder. You also can be hoarding your receipts because you need to hang on to that shiz. It's important. I personally keep every single receipt, even if you're doing online purchases for your business. I've personally tried to cut down a lot on my Amazon purchases, but hot dang, when you're out in the middle of nowhere and the city is a long drive and you don't have stuff accessible, it sure is easy. Make sure you print off all of your invoices and stuff for any online purchases that have anything to do with your business whatsoever. If you are using it for a facet of your business, it is part of a write-off for you, even if it's not something you're using full time. So like me having to drive parcels into town to mail them, or drive to go meet a customer that's local to deliver stuff, that means that my car is being used for business. And you can actually have a certain percentage of of your vehicle expenses can be used as a write-off as a company vehicle. It's not a straight up Ghost Town Metalworks vehicle. I'm not driving around a dorky car with like my huge logo all over it or anything, but it does get used for business stuff. And I use it on, you know, business trips and everything like that. But if you are going to be driving, you say you're someone that has to go drive an hour to get your tank refilled or something like that, keep your gas receipts. You had to use the gas to go do the thing, right? Keep yeah, anything expendables, you want to make sure you're keeping track of, like, even, you know, going to the hardware store and getting sandpaper. Keep all of that stuff. You want every single receipt.
We will kind of talk about different programs, but like the most common tax and income and bookkeeping is QuickBooks. And if you use QuickBooks, you can like scan your receipts straight into their app on your phone and then deal with them on the computer side later. You can just like put them in a holding space for you or your bookkeeper to review later. And yes, that's the magic. You can have a bookkeeper. It doesn't have to be you who reviews that. You can just upload it, put a half a note in there, and then somebody else has to figure it out later if you're fortunate enough to hire somebody to do your books.
It's on my list. It's on my wish list.
Before we were talking about fees. Fees are one of those things that like at the end of the year, you'll keep track of. So the fees you pay to Patreon, the fees you pay to PayPal, the fees you pay to Square, to Etsy, to whomever. If you paid somebody a fee, that's a write-off. That's money that you paid somebody for a service to help your business out. So although that money is something you are paying during a transaction, it is something that kind of comes out in the wash at the end of the year when you're taking a look at what you owe to the man.
That's true. Yes. So I use QuickBooks also, and I did actually put a phone call into one of my college besties and roommates today who is a CPA, just to be like, her name is also Emily. Emily, I got some deep stuff and people are asking some complicated questions. Like, let me walk you through this. So Emily was able to give a little bit of advice. She did preface it with that when it comes to like tax filing specific questions, there's really no way to give advice on that because each one of our situations is going to be so different. Whether we're filing as head of household, how many dependents we have. I mean, there are just so many things that like we can't necessarily give advice on, and that would be more like your H&R Block person, or, you know, you get to that point and your own business is doing pretty well, you probably should go get your taxes done with someone. At least if you want to tackle it as your own, like, more power to you. But I think it's a really good idea to at least pay money to someone the first time around, at least see how they're doing it. I myself will pay our little old man Gordon lots of money just for me to not have to do it. I don't mind. He's worth it, and he does a really good job. So, but QuickBooks has been awesome. I've been doing QuickBooks self-employed since about 3 years ago. And like Emily, have the app. They make it super easy for just snapping pictures of receipts. They even have a mileage tracker. Like I was talking about using my vehicle for doing post office runs or refilling gas tanks or whatever, fuel tanks. They're awesome, and you can go on your computer and categorize each and every one of your expenses, and you integrate every single account that you have so that no matter which card or account you're making purchases out of, all that stuff is getting filtered into your QuickBooks, and you can be marking it as a personal expense or business. At the end of the year, they literally print up like a tax summary that you can take off, like print off, take it to your tax person, hand it over. They're able to see like how much money you spent on tools that are over $2,500, all of that stuff. So it's super helpful. I cannot recommend QuickBooks enough. Even Emily was CPA Emily was even saying that like most of the companies that she's done things for, even large corporations, still use QuickBooks. All the animal hospitals I've ever worked at, all of their accountants use QuickBooks. Like, it's just a really, really good, solid business. And they're also integrated with TurboTax. So if you did decide that you wanted to try to file by yourself, they make it very easy to transition over to TurboTax to do e-filing for you. So just side note, because I know some people were wondering about that.
Yeah, I know we have a lot of people who are checking this out because they're in year one or year one of taking it seriously. And I say that in the sense that, okay, you've been doing this for a hobby, maybe you haven't, it's been part-time of your work, maybe it's full-time of your work, but you just haven't incorporated in some way, you haven't registered your business, and you're starting to consider that now. I got a lot of questions, and I'm seeing one just popped in, what if I'm not making a profit yet, right? Like, what if I'm spending all this money making all this stuff and my sales aren't at the same place that my expenses are? That's to be expected. In the first couple of years of business, you may not make a lot of money. You may come out in the red. That doesn't mean you weren't making sales or that you weren't working hard or that you weren't being successful. It just means that you are investing your money back into yourself. They put it right back into growing, and they do that for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And the IRS is expecting that. That makes sense to them. They go, well, you didn't get any magic funding. Of course you put all your money back into your business and there was nothing left over at the end except rent. So that is, you should be keeping track of everything. If you didn't make any money, you're not going to pay the government taxes. That's what it's going to end up being. But at the end of the day, you should still be going through that motion. You should be recording everything. You should be having your business above board, in that sense. Taxes, being willing to pay your federal taxes. You're doing that because it's actually giving you business longevity. When you've been doing a business for 5 years, but the first couple of years you didn't make any money, and then all of a sudden you're starting to show making money because you no longer have to buy those tools. You have all the things you need. You have the website set up. You have the business cards that are going to last you until they're outdated. All of that stuff is kind of a snowball avalanche effect, right? And then one day it really starts to come in as a reward, and you're going to go, okay, well, I want to grow and I want to get a business credit card, or I want to take out a loan. Those kinds of things. Personal, buy a house or buy a car with your own, history, your financial history. So getting your bank account started, getting yourself all, having all your records will help you down the road when you decide to be independent and be relying on your own business for that kind of stuff. For us, we thought that we might try to buy a house this year, and and then they were like, you did not make enough money with this business yet. And it was like, okay, well, that stinks. But then that's when I really started to understand that, like, I needed to have business history, not just the fact that, like, the money was there, but the banks want to see that the money, has longevity, and that you have, an investment. Having a 1-year-old bank account is no longer good enough to get a business credit card anymore. And that's something that happened during the pandemic. You used to only have to have a business account for a year before your own bank would consider giving you a business credit card. Well, now a lot of small banks have increased that to a 3-year wait time. So you have to have had your business bank account for 3 years before they will consider extending you any sort of credit, which, in last February, that was totally different, So it's stuff like that where by setting yourself up now and getting everything organized and planned, even if you're not making a profit yet, you're setting yourself up in the future to be more stable and more, everything will be easier down the road.
Yes. Yeah. And our H&R Block guy, we've gone to the same one for 3 years now. This will be our 4th year going to him. And he said that I'm at the point where I should probably technically have a business checking account. I've been super naughty, and I know that I have because I'm a sole proprietor. So someone was asking about the difference between LLC and all that. So we'll get into that too. But my thing is that I've used PayPal actually as my business checking. because I mostly do custom work and because I transitioned over from Etsy onto my GoDaddy website, I can choose what types of transactions I want to have on my website. I picked PayPal. That way I'm funneling all of my business purchases are all going through PayPal. So my invoices that I'm sending out are going through PayPal, and then the online shop purchases are going through PayPal. That was really helpful because that meant at the end of the year, I had actual tangible amounts for my business income because they're all going through the same route. When you kind of have things split up between Venmo, Zelle, Etsy, Square, like all of these different things, keeping track of your income is really, really hard. And when you do want to take a loan out, you have to go and scramble to get like, 20 different sources to show. So the good thing about me doing the PayPal thing, it ended up being totally serendipitous that I just happened to do that. No one told me to do that. I just did it. Is that PayPal actually has pretty good loans set up for small business owners. And because I'd been funneling all of my business through them, between the invoices and the online shop, they had a really good handle on what my actual sales were. And I was able to sign up for a PayPal working capital business loan. And it was brilliant. It's how I was able to buy a lot of the equipment that I got. It was how I was able to do my first real order of gold. And it's because they were able to see how much money I was pulling in. And the brilliant thing with working capital is that what they do is when you make a sale that comes back in, you'd already picked on a sliding scale like the percentage that you wanted to repay, like the rate you wanted to repay, which dictated how much money you could borrow in the beginning. But you could pick like a 10%, a 15%, 30%, whatever you wanted. So the bigger the loan you take out, the more they want to garnish off each payment that's coming in. But it was brilliant because it meant that I actually could have paid off a loan early, and they were actually pulling the money off right away, cutting the cream off the top to go towards the loan. It was one of the smartest things that I've ever done. I'm really glad that I did it. And the only reason I could do it is because I happened to funnel everything through PayPal. So they were able to see what my revenue was and had faith that I was going to keep having sales in order to repay it. And that's how I was able to get a custom Pepe tools, a rolling mill, and get a Bangle stretcher and like get all these other rad things and a new torch and stuff. And it's because I took out a loan. It's not very often. If you want to wait until you have the money to buy stuff, that's very fiscally responsible of you, and I commend you for sure. But I will say is that you're dragging out the growth of your company by doing that. If you don't have a choice and there's no other way around it, then it is what it is, and you have to work with the hand of cards that you've been dealt. But if you figure out, and there's things like Emily is saying where now banks are going to make you wait 3 years to be able to take a loan, maybe that's worth considering the PayPal thing. Start invoicing people even for pre-made items, through PayPal. Setting up a PayPal business account is free. And if you make enough sales through there, they'll freaking mail you a debit card. And then it's a MasterCard, and you can use it on websites and stuff, and in the local shop that maybe wouldn't normally accept PayPal. It's got a lot of perks to it, and it all ties in the end with the tax forms they give you. Like, it's really clean and very well thought out. So I can't speak highly enough of it. If anyone's trying to look for solutions for expanding their equipment or whatever, PayPal might be a good solution for you. And you can get that set up, and people are welcome to message me afterward if they have more questions about getting that going. But as far as someone had, just speaking of equipment and taxes, someone had messaged in, Emily, right, that it asked about like when to make, if it's smart to make those large end of year purchases. Right. And that's something I asked, yay, Emily, today, is that, what she thought about that. And she goes, usually it's really good if you start looking at the amount of profit, like say your business did exceptionally well this year, and you actually have quite a bit sitting in your checking account for the business. It is smart to go ahead and buy that expensive piece of equipment that you've been eyeballing, because now that's looked at as an investment back into your company, and that amount of money is now not going to be taxed as profit. So it does turn out into like a business write-off. It is beneficial because then you're not paying taxes on it. You needed that thing anyway to grow your business or your skill set or your offerings. It works out well. She did say that they got wind. her tax firm got wind that Biden is planning on raising taxes. So a lot of their clients opted to not spend their money at the end of this year for big purchases. At the end of 2020, I should say, because I can't really say this year anymore. At the end of 2020, they decided to wait because they're going to make those big purchases in 2021. That way, if tax rates go up, they can use that to counteract the higher tax rates and then not get taxed out as much because they're putting that expensive equipment in. So I thought that was pretty smart and not something I would have thought of. But it's always good to have a running list of your wish list of equipment and tools, because then you kind of have a go-to thing that you can check out if the opportunity arises.
Yeah, I would say, especially as most of you guys are looking at being in your first 3 years of business, coming out breaking even is a really good idea, especially if you don't need to show the profit for buying a home or, whatever. Sometimes you have to like be able to show profit if it's your only business income and it's like all you've got going for you. Then yes, you need to have a certain amount of profit. But if you're fortunate enough to be able to pay your bills and you're in a place where you don't have to worry about what somebody who doesn't understand your independent business is going to be judging you on, right? So if you're in a stable path, right, for the next couple of years and you kind of know where you're living, you know what you're expecting, that kind of thing, having a business that breaks even and using that money to invest in yourself is a great idea early on, especially if you're looking at maybe only having a couple $1,000s profit or $10,000 profit, whatever that scale is for your business. If you're only looking at that and you're not, making these huge gobs of cash hand over fist, I mean, I think we're all hoping for that. But if you're not, it is a good idea to try and invest in one of those items. And that item could be a $500 tool. It could be a $3,000 tool. It all really scales on what your numbers are and what your business is doing. So when we're talking about expenses, remember everybody's got a different sliding scale on what that looks like for their business and their like comfort levels and what they're working on.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see. Any other tips you have for taxes that we want to start at? We'll talk about the business registering and the types of businesses after. Right. I think we talk about taxes. Someone says, what tax responsibilities do small business owners have? I mean, I don't know, for Washington State anyway, I have to file quarterly sales taxes. That is something that we have to keep track of and that you have to file quarterly. Right now, I have to pay taxes in Washington State based on where the Washington State resident lives. If they live in Seattle, I have to pay a Seattle tax rate on their purchase. If they live in Spokane, I have to pay a Spokane one. I have to acknowledge I have one wholesale account down in Nevada. I also have to acknowledge any interstate sales. So anyone outside of Washington State that's in the USA, I still have a smaller tax rate on that. They only recently changed that. It used to be a couple of years ago that you wouldn't get charged on online sales if they were not local, and now they're realizing that revenue they're missing out on. So kind of.
Yeah, and absolutely every state is different in that regard. So it's going to be, when we're talking, we're talking to an entire country worth of people in all the participants and YouTubers. So it's really important to remember, like, all of the advice that we're giving, you should still Google what tax responsibilities do I have in X, and that's kind of my number one advice for business owners is, if you have a question, Google it. Yes. And Google it specifically until you've read 8 options of what that could possibly mean, especially when you're trying to figure these things out. It's like, if you're not going to pay a professional to answer this for you, get 30 different professionals to answer it for you on the internet. It's like one of the really crazy perks that we have kind of running our businesses in this generation, aside from online sales and online marketing, is that we have an entire encyclopedia of internet questions that other people have asked. You know, there's probably some person who lived in your town, who did your job, who's asking this question, you know, and that's like super hyper specific, but you get the idea. So, you know, for us, like, we don't have to do other states. I just have to worry about my state taxes. So when somebody's shopping outside of state but online, I don't have to do something. One of the perks of using a is that they're responsible for the taxes. So somebody like Etsy takes and remits state taxes for you. You don't ever have to deal with it. They take care of that. So you don't get the tax, but maybe your client had to pay it if they happen to be in a state where that's required. And I think a lot of the online programs that you can set up are starting to understand that that's something that can be programmed in. So it just knows if this sale happened between this state and that state, this thing has to happen, right? So using those marketplaces can be kind of helpful when you're getting started, because you don't have to think about, well, did I do this right? They're just this is how it's done.
And specifically, if you're in the States, look up Department of Revenue for the specific state that you're in. And that website will be very informative. And they may even have a contact number. You might even literally be able to call and talk to someone and say, hey, I want to get a proper business license. This is what I do. What should I do? So they'll help you. There's actually... I am sometimes a little bit late on my quarterly filings, not much. I'm not proud of it, but life gets away from me sometimes. There's literally a guy at Washington State Department of Revenue that's been like assigned to me, and I have his cell phone number saved in my phone, and he's the nicest man on the planet. And he's been so helpful to be like, hey, Charity, just calling, like your quarterlies are due. What are you doing? I'm like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, I'm really confused. Like I had like this wholesale thing, and like he totally walked me through the form. So they're really nice. A lot of times they're willing to roll with you with it. And you just tell them like, yeah, I'm a new business owner. Like they're understanding. They want you to do it correctly.
They want their money.
Yeah, they want their money too. But yeah, I mean, you never know until you reach out. So don't be hesitant to even reach out to a proper office like Department of Revenue, DOR, if you need to. So yeah, you'll be pleasantly surprised. But so I guess the takeaway for the tax thing is keep your receipts, keep track, do something like QuickBooks. It's definitely worth it. Someone asked at what point you should start filing taxes. As soon as you start making money. Like if you've literally sold like $500 or $1,000 worth of jewelry in the last year, you should probably think about like getting a proper business license if you haven't done that yet. And, you know, you'll have to Google and make sure that no one has your business name already. And then you have to check into your state and make sure there isn't a business in your state already with your name. There's a lot of that stuff to figure out. And then do other things like, is there a domain that's already been taken that has my business name that I want? You might be ending up having to rebrand. That's one bummer about not taking that official step of doing a business license to begin with, is that it could be that somebody else already has your business name. And then what do? You already have your Instagram handle and all this stuff, and like somebody else already has your business. So I recommend doing that sooner than later. If you haven't done a business license yet, you need to do that. And that ties into the next questions, which is about different types of business licenses. What the heck? Emily and I can't tell you what type of business license that you can do because that's going to be super specific to your situation and what you want for the future of your business, but we can tell you the differences between the different kinds of business licenses. Then maybe you can pick from there. Emily, are you guys an LLC? Or are you sole proprietor? Or what are you?
Yeah, so we're an LLC. My husband and I both own the business. I don't know if anybody's planning on going into business with anybody else, but when we formed Emily Marquis Designs LLC, we decided that it was going to be an LLC and that we actually split it 49-51 so that I am the majority owner. Even though we were engaged to be married and we were planning on going in this 50-50, we decided that a primarily female-owned business would be helpful if we ever decided to go for a grant or work on something that was going to be considered. We decided that having me be the majority owner may help us down the road. So that's something that, you know, you can consider when you're deciding to go in with something. 50-50 is very fair, but 51-49 is not that much different, especially when it can give you a leg up down the road. So we did an LLC, and then we do business as Marquis Jewelry Academy under that LLC. So our school and our design business are one and the same. So all of the accounting, all of the QuickBooks, all of the accounts, they're all exactly the same. And then we just organize just mostly for our own revenue and expenses understanding. We classify stuff that was bought for the school or revenue that came in from teaching, and stuff that was bought for jewelry creation and custom sales, bridal sales, all that on one side. So we just organize that kind of on the back end, but it's all under the same roof for us.
Excellent. Okay. I decided to start mine out as a sole proprietor. So Ghost Town Metalworks is still a sole proprietorship. That I am not intending on keeping it that way. The reasons I did that is that I felt like in the beginning when I knew it was going to be like a hobby, and I wanted it to be as simple as possible. I also wanted a lower startup. You know, registering as an LLC is more money out of pocket. So I did decide to become a sole proprietor. That means that my business ID or whatever is actually my social security number. It's because it's all one and the same. So this is a good chance to talk about a difference between an LLC and a sole proprietor. And there are lots of other types of business licenses. There's like an S Corp. There's like all of this other stuff that if you're getting really big and you have lots of employees and all this stuff, you'll be leaning more towards those things. But the chances are, if you are an artisan like we are, you're probably most likely going to be picking between either a sole proprietor or an LLC. Most likely, but depends on what you're doing.
As we've learned this year, you can be a small business and have 499 employees. So,
and take all the grant money. And that's why you have the micro businesses like us, right? I like that you started using that term. Emily kind of coined that.
Yeah, micro businesses, you know, the 5 and under crowd.
I love that. So this is the pros and the cons of sole proprietor. It's a little more clean in the beginning when you're kind of trying to you don't really have the bandwidth to be having to keep all this stuff separate. And it's pretty easy. It's lower cost for startup. This is the Debbie Downer about being a sole proprietor, is that if your business gets pretty big and then for some reason it tanks and you have to file for bankruptcy, guess what?
You're filing for bankruptcy.
Yeah, you collectively are filing for bankruptcy. They can come to your house and take your house. They can take your car. All of it's one and the same. If you personally have to file bankruptcy, they can come after your business assets because it's all together. It's all one and the same. So you need to be really careful. If you're going to be a sole proprietor, you need to be aware of that. So the last year when I went to good old Gordon at H&R, he told me that I might want to start leaning towards changing over to an LLC, just because the amount of money that I now have invested at this point, 4 years in, between my tools, my equipment, my stone collection, and the amount of metal I have. My husband almost passed out last year when I had to tell Gordon how much inventory I had in stones. So yeah, Aaron's like, so you don't need to buy stone this year. I'm like, yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'll just start hiding the packages when they come in the mail. So you get to the point where it's actually smart business wise to separate yourself from your business, because you're starting to take more risks. And now, for example, I decided to start yet another company. So I have Pacific Crest Creatives. That is, I have a business partner that is an LLC. It is not associated with Ghost Town Metalworks. It's a totally separate thing. However, Ghost Town Metalworks is leasing a studio space in the back, and Ghost Town Metalworks has a display out front, along with all of the other artists that were accepted into the space. So that LLC of Pacific Crest Creatives, like if that goes to you, they can't come after mine or my business partner's stuff. They can't come after Ghost Town Metalworks. It's not associated with it. It's totally separate. But Ghost Town Metalworks, if something happened, and hope to God that doesn't happen. But I mean, at this point, I'm a sole proprietor. I mean, they could come and take my house, my stuff, you know. You have to be careful with that kind of stuff. So LLC stands for limited liability company. That means that you're paying extra money into it so that if things do go bad with the company, that they can't come after your personal assets. So depending on what you're doing and what your long-term game is, it is worth it. If you are going to be serious about your business and you want to put the money into it to grow it, an LLC is definitely a good way to do it. And then I'm also getting to the point where like I want to start teaching like beginners metalsmith classes. It's an important thing to be an LLC at that point and not be a sole proprietor. There just are a lot of risks that come with it. And so Emily having an LLC makes so much sense, especially for them now having a school. That makes a lot of sense. And I also have another business. I just like to collect them all. Did I also tell you guys I'm a Beachbody coach? Don't tell anyone. It's kind of embarrassing. That's my fourth business. But I get my supplements cheaper, so don't give me a hard time about it, okay? But I have Heavy on the Metal is my third business, but that's under the umbrella of Ghost Town Metalworks. So that is also sole proprietorship. It's under the same business name and all that. But the thing is that if I'm doing a clothing brand and all of that, you got to cover your butt for like lawsuits and stuff. I mean, you just never know. I'm gonna be doing workwear for metalsmiths, making utility suits later if anyone's interested. But it's smart to roll that into an LLC. Like it just makes a lot of sense. My business is at the point where I need to change it to an LLC, and I'll probably be doing that this year. I called up my guy from the DOR that's saved in my cell phone, and we had a talk. And he said it's not hard to change from a sole proprietor to an LLC. He said it's not a big deal. Just some paperwork to fill out. So it's not like this huge undertaking. Don't be scared of it or intimidated by it. What other, do we have any other questions on here? I think we got like a pretty good handle on it.
I will mention something I learned. So my first year that we had the business, I ran everything out of my bank account. Don't do that. Don't do that. Separate it into whatever, like a PayPal account or a big bank account with a local business or a big business. It's not difficult once you have your business license to get an account for that money. But what I did learn, which might be helpful for a lot of people who are riding this kind of hump, deciding, should I have a business license? How much do I have to do? Like, where am I? You can backdate the start of the business. It doesn't have to be, I decided on Wednesday that my business existed. You can actually say, you know, yes, hi government, I started my business on this day. And take all of those investment purchases that you are bringing to the table and include them. If you, as the business owner, take an item that you bought as an individual and bring it to the business, right? So just because you made an investment purchase before you were a business doesn't mean that now you can't have that write-off. It actually is something that you as an owner are contributing to the business, and it has a value. And so don't forget about all that stuff that you kind of, you know, if you had a computer, or if you had a jeweler's bench, or if you had a really nice tool, like part of your capital contribution in that first year. And that is, you know, goes as an expense that you brought as opposed to making income. So that's another reason why people tend not to make money that first year, is because they're bringing all the stuff that they have and are going, no, this is a business tool now, and I'm going to use it this way. If you guys use a percentage of your cell phones, I will say every single one of you is using your phones if you have an Instagram, you know, so part of your cell phone bill is something that you're bringing to your business. If you're doing most of your online work at home, part of your internet bill is for your business. So there's little things like that that you have to remember, that you go, holy, like my business should be paying for some of this because I wouldn't be using it otherwise, you know?
Yeah. And the same also interjection here is the same thing goes for square footage. You're working out of your house, like most of us were, and I was until recently, which I still have my casting set up here in our garage, but my Ghost Town Metalworks studio used to take over our 2-car garage. So that our accountant, good old Gordon, had us calculate, like, we know like the full square footage of our house. And then he wanted to know like what the square footage of the garage was. And he figured out that ratio. And then that percentage of our mortgage got written off as business rent, essentially, because I was using that space of the house for business. Now, one of the things, some of the side notes on that is that you can't be using that space for other stuff. It needs to be business only. So if you're like silversmithing in the guest room or something else, like, you may not necessarily technically be able to write that off as well. I mean, they're probably not gonna, I don't know if they.
That's what the books say.
Yeah. That's more for your accountant, I guess, to answer. But yeah, I mean, part of your rent, part of your mortgage could potentially be written off as your office space for your home office. So yeah, utilities, internet, cell phone bill, we attribute half of my cell phone bill goes towards Ghost Town Metalworks, business expenses. So yeah, all of that stuff, you know, if you've been on the fence about trying to decide if you want to get a business license or not, if it's past the point where it's getting a little more serious than a hobby, I mean, you really should. It would be beneficial to you to have a business license for it.
I will also, those of you who are renting, you just want to make sure that either your the place that you're renting is okay with having a business in that space. Okay. Because if you file for a business license in a condo association that doesn't allow businesses of a certain kind, you could be screwing yourself on that one. So check in, see if it's okay, see if other people are doing it. I think now that, like, but like, I remember we had to make sure that when we were renting in DC, we lived in a condo association, we rented somebody else's private condo, right? They were all individually owned. But I had to make sure that both the condo association and my landlord were okay with me having my jewelry business based out of my home. And I think the rules were like, as long as people weren't congregating in a common space, and that, you know, I didn't recycle. Like, I think there was something about my recycling from shipments couldn't be put into the condo association's recycling and had to be brought to the transfer station instead. Like, weird stuff like that. But if you are renting and you aren't a homeowner, you can still get a business license. You can run your business out of the place, but you just got to make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's.
Yes. Yeah, that's really good. I wouldn't have thought of that. I guess now that I think about it, even with our mortgage, they had been asking when they knew that I had a business, they said, well, is it a storefront at your house? Like, do you have customers coming to your house, or is it just a workspace? And pretty much what it boiled down to is that they weren't comfortable with having a storefront at the house. We're not zoned for that kind of business. So, but to have my workshop here and be doing online sales was totally fine. They just wanted to make sure that I wasn't physically having customers coming over and being it run as a storefront and have like a sign out. This is like Ghost Town Metalworks, like at our house and everything, because our house isn't zoned for it. So yeah, I mean, there are things like that you need to consider with your individual living arrangement. So yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. That's a really good point.
And of course, there's like wiggle room, right? You know, what does the book say versus what's actually going to happen? If you end up, you know, post pandemic having a custom client who's local stop by your house for a design appointment, who's to say you're not having a cup of coffee with your friend, you know?
Yeah, and you don't have like operating hours, right? Like posted operating hours.
I think it's about accountability, right? So, you know, do your best to be honest and follow the rules is always the advice, but also remember, like, you're a human being. If you're being respectful and you're doing your best and you're trying to, you know, make things work, but you happen to want have a client over, and don't piss off your neighbors while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Nobody's no, you know.
Yeah. Don't book yourself out for 2 clients or 3 clients coming by every day, different clients, then you're gonna get in trouble. Someone wrote in the chat here, where do we look for grants? I'm guessing Elizabeth asked that, and that's probably because you had mentioned women-owned business grants. I know someone here locally that has, I know, taken advantage of that. I'm not sure where they access that information. It was a national level or statewide level or as small as county, but in terms of grants, like if you were to be looking for a grant that was for female business owners, would you be looking like a national pandemic relief type of level, or what type of place would you be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I do know that the second round of pandemic relief loans, I just try it, like, I heard it dyslexic, even though I think I said it right. I know that they're looking at minority owned businesses and tiny businesses first, and being a female makes you a minority owned business. So that's the kind of thing that when they're looking at putting out those loans, it's like one of the, you know, 50% of us are somehow going to be have the foot in the door for that. Whereas, you know, last time around, you had your big box businesses getting those loans. They're going to be prioritizing them a little bit differently this time around. When it comes to smaller grants, I really have not been able to crack that egg yet. They're really hard. Usually you have to have a grant writer, you know, on your side, or be investing your whole life into trying to get this grant money, or else you're not going to be able to figure it out. But you can start researching it. Just type it in, like, describe what you're doing, type in grants, describe parts about yourself, type in grants, see what kind of comes up. And, you know, the thing is usually you find out about grants about a week before they're due or a week after they're due. And it's too late, because usually you need to be figuring those out like 6 to 18 months ahead of time. You're not going to be getting money the moment you think you're going to get money because you applied for something. You got to be planning ahead of time, project-based or investment-based decisions.
Yes.
What I would recommend to everybody is consider your first year or your first year official getting someone to do your taxes for you in this spring. Work with somebody, pay somebody. It may cost a couple $100. It may cost, but they're going to help you understand everything that you're dealing with. They're going to walk you through unraveling the pile of receipts in your life. And if anything, they set you up for a better year next year. And if they happen to jive with you, you can consider working with them as a bookkeeper, where they can kind of keep you on track. I know this year we used a bookkeeper all year. She was amazing. She's stepping back from monthly bookkeeping, so we won't be able to use her next year. But I highly recommend it to anybody who's thinking about trying to get their ducks in a row. Hiring somebody on a monthly basis or an annual basis is very helpful. And then there's also worth mentioning, there's a couple of jeweler-oriented Instagrams for accounting and websites, and I think we can send you guys those out in a link. I don't want to mention them because I don't want to have them incorrectly, but we'll put the link in the video comments and we'll send it out in the email for you guys. Recommended jeweler-oriented accounting.
Yeah, that would be great. That's wonderful. And some other tips, like even if you don't know what you're doing, like Michelle said, she said need someone to come from H&R Block to her house and hold her hand. No, you need someone to come from H&R Block to watch your kids so that you can get your stuff together and get your paperwork together. But the thing is that the more organized you have it, the less time it will take to do your taxes and the less money it will cost you. If you come in there with all your crap mixed up in like 5 different file folders and drop it on their desk, your tab's going to be a lot more expensive than if you come in there with at least your types of receipts separated by paper clips or if you went through and added up all of your utilities and made a nice little Excel sheet and printed it off so they could actually see like your business name or your name, cell phone bill, annual cell phone bill, internet bill, all of your utilities and like write-offs that you want, amount of tools that I purchased that were over $2,500, amount of tools I purchased around under $2,500. I think that's how they have it split up right now for the most part. But if you can come in with that information for them, have your Etsy tax form printed off or your PayPal one or Square or whatever, have all of the documentation you need and try to have it as organized as possible. Your tax person may not flip through each one of those. Like if you brought all of your paperwork in of all of your purchases, they may not want to flip through all the purchases, but if you were able to go through and add up the different types of purchases and just have like a summary sheet, but bring in the paperwork with, they'll staple all that together. Even if you're e-filing, they'll still hand you like a hard copy file at the end. But it'll save you money. The more organized you have it, the better. And the other cool thing too, the H&R Block does, and I don't know about the other tax services out there, but if you do decide to go to a real person instead of figuring it out yourself on TurboTax or whatever, then they will actually allow you, if they calculate that you have a return coming back, like a refund, they'll actually let you pay them out of the refund. Then you're out of no pocket money that day. Like they'll just take it out of it, which is great because then you're not stuck paying them. I think last year between my business, our income taxes, and my husband also has a side business, like our tab to H&R Block was like $500 last year because it was just so complicated. And that's the most that it's been so far. Usually it's like 200, 250, but I had a lot more paperwork for Gordon to sort through, and I did not do as good of a job of organizing it. We paid for it in the end. So just try to have your stuff organized and consolidated the best you can. Type up Excel sheets if you can. It'll pay off for you in the end. So, well, does anyone else have any, let's see, any other questions? Ask a neighbor that has their own ranch who they use. Ask locals of small businesses. Yeah, Nicole's just recommending ask around your neighborhood, whoever, ask them who they take their taxes to, their accountants are, and you'll get the best recommendations. And you'll also be told which ones to stay away from. On the flip side, they'll be like, don't go to that one business. They'll fall asleep in the middle of your taxes and charge you for it. So you never know. But yeah, that's the best thing is to ask around local too. But so I guess we're wrapping this up. I think we did pretty dang good as far as like running through all this stuff. I feel like we did a good job. Good job.
Yeah.
So we'll send out a link to everyone. Even if you were someone that thought like you might be seeing this later on YouTube and you were going to come to the Zoom and you missed it, pretty much if you're on our list, we'll be sending you the link to the YouTube video for review. And then we'll be sending you the links, like Emily said, for like jewelry specific accounting stuff. I'm going to attach that super simple spreadsheet as an Excel sheet so that you guys can edit it to your needs. But I wanted to say one little side note about custom work versus like retail inventory that I forgot to mention earlier. So this little nugget at the end, this is my best comparison for someone. If someone walks into a store and grabs a dress off of the rack and then brings this dress into your shop and wants you to make that exact same type of dress, but fit them exactly in their size, do you think they're going to cost the same amount of money? No. Yeah, no.
First of all, you tell that client to go take that dress to the dressmaker and see if they can make it in their size.
Right. Well, chances are, which depending on where they got it from, they might be having to get on a plane and go international. That's what I've done lately. I would love to find a dress shop that has like one at a time made pieces by a local dressmaker. I'd be all over that. But the fact is that when stuff's mass produced, or not mass produced, but just like same template, whatever, the cost is much lower. If you're going to ask for something to be tailored to your size in this particular material, all of this stuff, it's going to cost you. And I cannot tell you how many times there is going to be a client that's a custom client that is super easy to deal with. They let you have artistic freedom. Conversations are short and sweet. Those are like the dream clients. Then you have the ones that take 3 weeks to pick a stone out. Okay, and you have lots of phone conversations. The fact is that the more you have to talk to someone, the more time that you've invested in that custom. And when you're making stuff for inventory, you're not talking to anyone except yourself if you're having a crazy day, but you don't have to talk to anyone about planning. You're just going to do what you want to do, and that's fine. You just cut out hours of communication. So make sure that when you're thinking about custom work that you're actually factoring in communication time. You're emailing back and forth or messaging on, you know, social media, sending stone pictures. I mean, doing research to figure out how much to even charge them. All of that stuff should factor into your pricing for your custom pieces. So make sure if people are asking for customs that you're not figuring out what you would just cost for you to make that ring in general. You need to think, what would it cost me to make this ring for this one person that no one else is going to have, or whatever. Make sure you work that into that. Michelle said, is there a list of worksheet of the kind of information I need? What do you mean a list of a worksheet?
I think she's talking about like what she needs to have ready for tax accountants.
Okay.
That kind of stuff.
That makes sense. Would that help you guys if we made kind of like a checklist for things for you guys to like keep track of for your taxes? We could always like attach that as a document too.
Yeah, I think we could come up with something pretty helpful. Also, what I would say is if you don't know anybody in your area, like a small business, like, again, this is me. I'm always saying just Google it. I would Google your town name and like similar businesses, like Stonington Jeweler. I would Google Stonington Brewery, Stonington wedding dresses, right? Because those are the kinds of things that like I assume I know are in my town, and I would call them out and say, hey, I'm your neighbor. I am a local merchant. Who do you use for your accounting? Because you work with somebody local. See if they're local. And if not, move on to the next one. I mean, just because a place that is small or new to you, or you feel, you know, that you don't know the answers, usually the easiest thing is to just look it up and then pick up the phone and ask somebody. And more often than not, other small businesses are in the same situation that you're in. And if they weren't right this second, they were at some point before. And they're going to want to help you just the same way as we want to help you. And everybody here is hoping that, you know, at the end of the day, we're all small business owners and we're all just trying to be helpful. And if somebody answers and they're a jerk, don't shop with them later on in the year.
Yeah, that's true. I was just gonna say that that even asking like your hairdresser or someone who they use, I mean, they would be a
waitresses.
Great example. Yeah,
ask waitresses. Do you know any local businesses around here? I mean, not that we're really seeing a lot of waitresses, but you know, they're still out there working hard.
Yeah, and they're great because they're, you know, and I just think of hairdressers in general because they're going to be, a lot of times they're working for themselves, so they'll end up having a good advice for you, for someone to go to. And they like talking, you know, that's why they have that job. They talk to you while they're cutting your hair. But okay, well, I hope everyone got something out of this, at least one thing, and then we'll consider it a nugget of success. But I wanted to thank everyone so much for being here. Thank you, Emily, so much for all of your wisdom. That was super awesome, and what you brought to the table was super great. So I appreciate that. And then I appreciate everyone popping in. You guys have been so good in the chat with asking great questions. You were great asking questions in advance. So Emily and I will get a YouTube link over to you guys, and we'll get other helpful docs. We'll get like maybe a tax help checkoff list type of thing to get you reeling in the direction that you need and get you thinking about the kinds of you know, things that you should be hanging on to in terms of like receipts or utilities and stuff like that. And then recommendations for resources for getting your taxes done or your accounting done. So we appreciate you guys a lot. If you enjoyed this, let us know. I don't know, maybe we can end up making this kind of a cool thing in the future, because I feel like there's a huge need for this, obviously, for us to get almost 100 people together for this in like just a couple of days notice without really like that much marketing necessarily, just goes to show like people need it. Like, we need help with this stuff, and it's not super simple. It's not like you can just look it up real easy. It's all complicated, and it depends on where you're at in your, what I call Smith walk, you know, and where you're at in your business, where you live, how you live, what kind of place you live in, you know, and what level of business you're at. If you have more than one job, all of this stuff factors into it. So it's complicated. So thanks for hanging in there with us too, as I was battling internet problems in the beginning. That was freaking ridiculous. I was actually going to put on makeup and didn't have time for that either. So glad that my internet's a little bit grainy. Can't see. So anyway, well, thank you, Emily. I know it's late there. It's like 10:15.
10:15.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Hanging tight.
I started teaching this morning at 9 a.m. So I'm ready for, well, I had 3 cups of coffee, so I'm ready for bed.
That's good. Go to sleep. Everyone go to sleep. Dream about business licensing and taxes and all those other wonderful sugar plums of small business.
I don't want to dream about business taxes.
Dream that you got the biggest refund you've ever had in your entire life. I love it. Well, we'll see you guys all soon. And yeah, thanks again for hanging with us. We appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.